Yeah, this is the beginning of the material I sent you as the introduction and the theoretical part. Really, I'm going to try to explain it to you as briefly as I can. Remember, again, as I told you last time, these in the on the Moodle e-learning system, the university system. As I told you last time, I posted everything for you. You will find this lecture already recorded from last term. It might be a little bit slightly different. It might be, you know, the wordings and the phrases, etc., could be a bit different, but the same material, the same contents. So please try to check this and the previous recordings, because I will post this recording as well. So attendance is absolutely necessary for all of you to follow what I'm saying, and you can use both for taking notes. It's up to you the way you arrange that. Now, the introduction, as you can see here, as I told you, now what is world literature? Really, the idea, ladies and gentlemen, the idea is to see literatures which are really in our context, any literature which is written by foreigners, by not home, if you like, writers. And it depends what home are we talking about. Now here for us, because we are studying English literature and English language, and our department is English, for us, anything which is written by other languages than English is seen or can be grouped or can be discussed as world text or as world literature. Now, for many people, really, the term itself has changed meanings and has achieved so many other differences or other implications, because not every text which is written by a foreign writer could be seen as a world text. Here, the idea of world to mean really very, very important and very famous and very big and so on and so forth. So that's why here the concept really world literature is a bit problematic, is a bit tricky, and people differ in what they think of world literature. For us, as I said, as literature of English language and literature, we think of any text which is written, for example, by any other language apart from English. Now, that's why the focus could be on Russian, on German, on French, on Spanish, on Latin, on Italian, on Portuguese, on Greek, on Indian, on Arabic, on any other language, African, etc., etc. So how do we decide that? Really, that's the problem. It's up to you how you decide which text to choose and so on. But is this the case here? We ask the question, is, you know, or can any text be discussed or studied or read as world text? No, because the word here, world literature or world text, not just any other text from any other language. That's not the case, absolutely not the case. Because there are authors who are really good and great and famous and so on and so forth, with great ideas, of course. There are good writers and there are bad writers. And even the word, when you say bad or good writers, again, this is something personal and this is something really subjective. You may say this is true and you may say not true. So this is a big argument, really, a really big argument about how and what to say of a world text as a world text, you know? So the Western culture, or Western, if you like, English, American, Anglo-Saxon culture, think of any text, maybe European text or Anglo-Saxon, if you like, European or white text, or European text as world text? Well, it's up to them. You know, we really don't mind here to say, well, okay, yes. But you see, again, there are, for example, Arab texts which are really amazing and more powerful. Yeah, there are Indian texts which are really amazing and more powerful. Yes, but who decides? You see, who decides? Really, that's the question here, that because we are studying, as I say, Anglo-Saxon literature, we want to see how they look at world literature, really, from their perspective. Of course, we can judge it the way we want as foreign students or as Arab students or as Omani students or anybody. You know, it's up to you to see things like that. So that's why, really, to be honest with you, I even differ from my colleagues here in the department who are teaching the same course. You know, they teach different texts from the texts that I teach, because they think what I'm teaching is very European, and for them that's not really fair. I don't know why, but they think this is European. But to me, I'm not European, of course, but to me, I think world literature, from the thing I see it, from the thing I read it, you know, and because we are studying English as our main focus and our main really language of instruction and so on, that's why I prefer to have a Russian or French or German or Spanish or Greek text rather than an Arab. Being an Arab myself, you know, I don't want to sort of have that, because since we are already Arab people, we know this from our own culture, from our own background, etc. That's my view. You can agree with me or you can disagree with me. It's up to you. I'm not forcing anybody to agree or to accept any of what I'm saying. Now, some other people, like in case somebody from China or somebody from Bangladesh or India, they would use maybe Indian text. Again, it's up to them, you know, the way they see it. I'm not saying that their texts are not good. No, I'm not saying that. There are many Persian or, you know, Turkish or Afghani or Pakistani texts which are good and lovely. Yeah, absolutely. But you see, I'm saying here, to me, I thought the way I was taught and the way I learned and the way I teach really things to do with, to me, what originally established as world text. And to be honest, and we have to admit it, you know, the Arab novel, for example, even the Arab novel, only started recently, 100 years old, you know, when you look at about the novel, for example, or if you look at any other literature. I'm not saying that they are below or lower or whatever. No, I'm looking at established, absolutely well-established texts, which to me are really world texts. And to go back to what theorists have talked about, what is world literature. So really here, this introduction talks about that in so many ways, okay, in so many perspectives. Here, you know, you can see the reasons, or sometimes I highlighted some of this to say to you what is world literature, okay? So the concept, I'm saying here, the concept of world literature has gone through so many changes, has developed through many ways and through many writers and critics. Are you following, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, doctor.
Actually, I have only one boy here, and the rest of you are girls. Yeah. So yeah, when I say ladies and gentlemen, so I must make sure about things. I think I checked it last time. I have only one boy in this group. Anyway, no problem. Now the idea, do you see what I mean? Do you agree? Do you have any comments, any ideas? Hello, Almaha?
Yes, doctor.
Huh?
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you mean by Anglo-Saxon?
Anglo-Saxon, oh my God. You are fourth year and you are graduating and you don't know what Anglo-Saxon?
I am an education major.
Ah, okay, okay, okay. Right, we're really Anglo-Saxon, to go back to the old traditional origin of the British people from Saxonia, or Anglo-Saxon, because the original tribes of people who came to England to live in Britain as the British Isles today, the original tribes of these people are called the Saxon, the Angles and the Saxons. And now we still keep this word, till now we say Anglo-Saxon, including the Americas. We use this. And Saxon, originally they are tribes who lived all over Europe, from in France, Germany, and even going down to I think all of Western Europe can be seen, or can have some of those Saxons, because they were originally the first tribes to come from North Germany, or actually from Scandinavian countries, going down and then traveling to Britain. That's why we use the word Anglo and Saxon, from England or English. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And now today we use it to say really the white people. Originally here we use the word white people, it means Anglo-Saxon. And you find Saxonia in so many parts of Europe today. You can see some places are still called Saxon or Saxonia or whatever. So the idea, I was saying, yeah, any other question? I don't know. Yeah, okay, no problem. I will see. I will see this later. No problem. Now, the question really here, I'm saying, I want to go back to explain here the concept. That's why some other people have, for example, said, I don't want to include white European Anglo-Saxon texts. I want to use African texts. I want to use, Chinese texts. I want to use Japanese text, or Vietnamese, or Indian, or Bengali, or, yeah, okay, Turkish, yeah, Greek, or I don't know. Yeah, but to me, as I said, to go back to the original implications and meanings of world literature, really is originated in Europe. So that's why the concept was developed by Europeans, mainly Germany by Goethe. Wolfgang Goethe was the first man to talk about world literature, and Goethe was the real founder of the name world literature. So that's why I keep this myself in this really idea. If you see, you can see my texts that I have chosen. I've chosen Spanish, Russian, Italian, Greek, maybe, and so on. And I chose some, 2 or 3 examples of African well, I'm saying Arab, really, to be honest, Arab texts, and by chance, really, they are Syrian texts. And you can see here, as I said, English, French, Russian, and Spanish, Italian, and Latin. And, the idea really I want to say is here, as I said, the other factor has to do with the internal organization of literary studies. Here I'm saying how world literature of the longest time made its academic home in departures of comparative literature programs. Here I'm saying how the whole idea of world literature started, because people originally, they never worried about, in the English departments, I mean, maybe 100 years back, or maybe 50 years back, or 60 years back, nobody studied any other foreign text. They studied only, for example, in France, they studied French texts. In Germany, studied German texts. In America, studied American and English texts, and so on. But only recently, because of what is called comparative literature, they started to compare, you know, English with the French, English with the German, English or American with the Spanish, or so on. So within the European language and through the Latin, because all these European languages use the same alphabets, the same letters, and the same forms of letters, and that's why, you know, they started to have somewhat is called, you know, if you like, comparative literature. And that's why the question of world literature started from comparative literature. That's why sometimes they say, well, this is minor literature, or important or less important, big or small, you know, big or maybe important, or maybe again neglected. Yeah, you can say all these things, but really to us that's not the question here. We look at the literatures which are translated, because originally, if you want to teach German in Britain, you have to translate German text to British, to English. If you're studying in Germany something American, you have to translate it to German, and so on. So that's why the question of translation became really the question about how we study the you know, other cultures or the other literatures. And that's why today, for example, I'm saying, you know, 60 years ago, you know, this question of world literature and globalization was nothing. Now things really have changed. Since the last 50 years till now, things really went absolutely, you know, so much crazy about looking into other cultures and neglected, if you like, cultures and so on. So here, that's why we say, for various reasons, contemporary or comparative literature in practice had difficulty living up to the ambition of being sufficiently inclusive to the literatures of the world. One reason certainly had to do with the eternity of the field. Another resided in the broken lack of interest in the so-called minor and particularly non-Western literatures. Yeah, sometimes we say this, that why people don't read our literature. You know, when you say, well, you know, sometimes, you know, people think like this. It's a shame, really. It's a shame. It's not mean. It doesn't mean that their texts are better than our texts. But you see, this is the idea. Sometimes it depends on the people and what is called minor or lesser. You know, this is again the question: who decides? You know, who decides that this is important and not important? You know, the people of power. The people of power have the power to decide which is which. You know, this is the idea. Much of the world literature was left to specialists in national or regional literatures to deal with, while comparative literature programs limited themselves to the larger Western literatures, even if many seminal works from all over the world became ever more widely available in translation. You know, sometimes, yeah, I mean, even today, people say, I don't want to study a Chinese text. Why? Because just that, because I don't like it. Because, you know, people just say because, means I'm not interested, you know? So really, this is the crazy thing, but it doesn't mean that these texts are not important. Which, just like, I mean, today, if you talk to any Japanese or to any German man in English, they will not respond to you. Go to Turkey today and speak in English in Turkey, and nobody will answer you, because they believe that they have their own language, and which is, to me, I think, crazy, you know? But this is it. People have their own sort of personal, sometimes racist feelings about it. So we can't help it. Now here I move to the definitions and uses of the word, really. What is world literature? Notice, defining world literature has been and is likely to become or continue to be an open-ended discussion. That's it. No, really, it went on and on and on, and we can't define exactly, as I just said. we can't define exactly, you know, we can't agree, because if I agree, like me, for example, a Syrian Arab professor of literature, maybe I like this. Somebody else say, no, I will not agree with you. I mean, as I said to you, like my colleagues here in the department, in the other two groups, they are teaching something which I'm not teaching, you know. It's their own taste, their own feeling, and my own feeling, you know. But you see, this is the interest about literature, you know, the openness of it. And that's the beauty of it, I think. Notice here, again, ideas of literary value, institutional constraints, and the international reception of concrete works, interest in attempts to define what world literature is. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that all texts can be world literature, for God's sake. Texts have to have value, you know? And that's what they say, ideas of literary value. So a literary text must have value to become a world text. So people can read and borrow and say, wow. They say, wow, it's lovely, and so on. So there must be a value in it. And this, of course, would lead to international reception. How will be received by international audience? You know, like an Omani novel or an Omani poem or a Spanish poem. For me, for example, a Greek poem to me will be useless, but maybe to its own people could be lovely. Okay? So how it is perceived outside its culture and its language is the question. Really, that's the question here. So notice here we say two concepts. We have to think. Notice world literature has often really tacitly been assumed to cover either one of the two concepts, that each in its own way makes sense, but at the same time seems limiting for the needs of the globalizing central situation. One definition holds world literature refers to that part of world literature that is both the best of what literature has to offer and proposes universal appeal. I think this is the first thing so far, this is the first meaning of world literature. It must have ideas. It must have, value. That's what I'm saying here, the best, and when you say best means it has value, it has meanings, it has, you learn something from it, and you say, whoa, this is good and this is great, and I believe that, and I like this, and I agree with this, and I love this, and blah, blah, blah. So when texts have value, have ideas, and people from all other cultures like that and follow that and would like that, then would say, oh, this is world text. So that's the main, or one main criteria, one main idea that what a world literature is. Again, we say this is commonly held notion that implies a strict hierarchy in the organization and valuation of literature. Now, the other definition may be a world literature is to be, of course, world literature. It must have an influence. It must have quality and influence, which is the same, like idea and importance and appeal. The same, appeal or idea, or so we say it has quality, the quality and influence. So notice the almost diametrically opposed to the first, and considers world literature to be all of the world's literature without pronouncing or questions. Well, you see, so there are two absolutely opposing ideas. One saying texts which are valuable and which are quality, which have appeal, which have greatness, and which have really meanings and values. And some people say no, that's not needed. Well, I don't agree with that. Really, I don't agree with that. To say that's not important. Quality and influence is not important. I don't agree. While these definitions have the merit of being clear-cut, their extreme implicit makes it impossible to address more intricate questions and to avoid blind spots. It's, for example, obvious much of the world literature, according, of course, to this definition, is Western literature. You know, because sometimes people would say, this is only Western. That's not true. That's not true. We're not saying it's only Western. You know, I'm saying originally the term used first by Western, you know, critics and Western writers to say it's their literature. Although I'm saying claims of universalism are not restrained for that reason, it is also unclear how there can be a dynamics between works of literature that have proven to be long-living international classics and works that may not have the same, you know, reputation, and, you know, so on. So the idea really, I'm saying here that some people think these texts or world texts should include all those other texts which are maybe neglected. Again, you know, I think this is questionable, and I think that's not possible. Notice, a complete openness to all of the world literatures soon becomes uninteresting, as questions of quality of writing and relevance of themes and historical description are bound to come up, as they should in any study of literature. Because you see, at the end of the day, to be honest, why do you study a text? Why do you read a text? Why do you go to a movie? Why do you go to a restaurant, for example? Huh? Why do you go to a restaurant? You say, oh, there is a good restaurant. Why do you say good restaurant? Huh? Can you tell me?
Because it provides a good service.
Good service, good food, isn't it?
Yes, if it is
good food, lovely food, isn't it?
Yes.
So it means you go there and you say, wow, this is good, because you love the food there, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why do you read a novel? Or why do you go to a film? Why do you watch a film? Or why do you do you go to a play or watch a play? Yeah, absolutely. So there is value. You pay money for this food. You say, oh, this is tasty, and I'll pay this for this because it's lovely and tasty, blah, 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 blah. So it's really the same thing. You can't say any novel is tasty and is great and valuable in the same way. So it must be, the question of value must be in operation here. Must be in operation. No way. No way. So when people will say, yeah, why don't you include another text? Why do you do this? Well, because these texts, some of them are rubbish. Some of them are rubbish. That's it. You know, when you don't learn something from anything, how would you go on reading it? You don't. You stop reading it. You stop reading it. You know, and really this is the idea, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm saying. So the question here is very clear. When we say a text must have value. So here, to go back to this next question, one crucial difference between the formerly dominant definitions of world literature and more recent attempts to redefine the concept should be summed up as a move from seeing world literature as an object, either as a small canon or a vast ocean of texts, or like, for example, to a paradigm for approaching texts from or within diverse contexts and making connection between them? Well, yeah, because when you look at world literature as an object, as a paradigm, as, you know, a body of texts, you know, to see how they are canonized, how they are respected. You know, sometimes I say to people, you know, sometimes I say to people, and my students, especially the arts students, when they graduate in English and they have not studied Shakespeare, I really feel sad and miserable. طفول يا طفول.
Yes, doctor.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, fine. What about you?
I know another طفول. Is it you or somebody else?
No, this is my first time to take with you.
Okay. Okay, يا طفول. Do you agree with me?
For Shakespeare, yes. I think he's the father of art.
Isn't it a shame that some people who graduate in English and they have studied no Shakespeare? Can you believe it?
Yes, because we think he's an icon.
And you don't study him? Sorry? And you don't study?
Because I'm an education student, so I don't know. Maybe it's more important for art students.
Yeah, I'm not talking about you people as arts people. I'm talking generally about
Okay.
but you are studying English, isn't it? In the education, your major is English language, isn't it?
Yes.
You must study some Shakespeare. You must. You see what I mean?
Yes, got it.
I'm saying because it's a shame that because these people are absolutely the founders of the language, for God's sake, the real literature, the real thing. When you study a play like Hamlet or like Macbeth or like Othello, or when you study a poem, you know, have you studied literature too? Of course you did literature too, is correct?
Yes.
Tuful, I go back to Tuful. You studied the literature too?
Yes.
Introduction to literature too?
Yes, we did.
No poems by Shakespeare?
No, we have a poem written by Shakespeare.
You studied one by Shakespeare?
Yes.
Yeah, good, alhamdulillah. Otherwise, I will be angry. Anyway, what I'm saying is that there are texts which are really a must. They are a must texts. Must texts means it's, well, I mean, this is my opinion. Some of my friends, some of my colleagues, some of my, you know, people say, well, why? You know, this is old-fashioned, maybe this is, no. Texts with value must be studied. Texts with greatness must be studied, must be read, must be understood, really. So that's why here the question of world literature, I'm saying, is you know, important. The questions of canonization here, what we say, canonization means the canon, means the mainstream. What do we teach in literature? What is the canon? Meaning, what is the mainstream that we always teach? We always teach Shakespeare, we teach Dickens, we teach Hardy, we teach the Brontes, blah, 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 blah. We teach these people, okay? So it means we say that these are the canon. I'm not saying we should not teach anything else, but we must know these people because their writings have been studied and have been read and reread and valued and revalued. And, you know, we agree that they are great texts. I mean, sometimes people say, yeah, well, yeah, you know, I don't like this. Okay, there are about it, no problem, you know. But you see, this is the question here, that some people think that world literature only is the canon. Well, that's not true. That's not true. These range here, I say, questions of how literature travels across borders, how translations are used, how genres, you know, influence each other, how they move across literatures, whether there is a specific poetics of texts that gain global recognition, how highly canonized works can be read in connection with lesser known ones, and so on. So all these matters can be addressed, can be questioned, can be discussed to define what is world literature, you see? So really, this is the idea I want you to highlight here. Again, when you look at the last point here, making use of this volume, I think that's not important. I will move on to tell you about our friend Goethe, because our friend Wolfgang Goethe was the first man to talk about world literature. And Johann Goethe, as you can see his name here, the German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, born 1749, died 1832. He was the first person to talk about really world literature. And he was the first man to use the word world literature. The debate started with him. And he thought, as German writer, he thought German literature is very rich and all European literature must borrow from Germany. Well, we know this is selfishness, if you like. And people think, well, maybe this is selfishness. I don't know, but it's up to us to agree or disagree on that. But I think Goethe was a great man to really discuss his ideas in so many ways here. Now, as we shall see, you can still see my screen, correct?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. So notice here, I move on to the next, the Gertie debate. Really, here Goethe was the first man, as I said, to give us a definition about that. And really, because, as I said, his influence, he was such an influential poet, was a great writer and short story writer and poet, and so on. Really, he was himself translated into so many languages, and he was the father of what is called later on about Enlightenment or Renaissance or modern Renaissance in Europe, really in this way. So here I give you some points and highlight some points about Goethe. Scholars, notice here, I will read some of these sentences and I'll explain them to you to give you what really Goethe explained to us world literature. Scholars now generally agree, though, that Goethe himself meant neither the two interpretations that they're given. At the time of Goethe's taking interest in world literature, Europe had only relatively recently emerged from a period of violent warfare occasioned by the French Revolution and by the Napoleonic Wars. Goethe had himself been actively involved in some of these. After the final defeat of Napoleon in 1815, Europe had entered upon a period of pacification and political restoration. Goethe had noted that under these circumstances, an increase in the production and circulation of periodicals facilitated the exchange of ideas across Europe. So you see, Goethe then was writing right after, if you like, the peak of his writing, right after the defeat of Napoleon. You know, Napoleon, as you can see, was defeated 1815. And when you say, because Napoleon really nearly conquered all Europe, and, Napoleon was French, and he even reached Moscow, and he even reached to us, to Syria, to Egypt, to so many places. Even he reached, like in many ways, even through North Africa to Turkey, to places like this. And Napoleon, in his as a French, or the French Empire, because of this, the influence of the empire, ideas went on throughout Europe. And this is really when he said exchange of ideas. Exchange of ideas. Really, that's what he's saying. Although politically speaking, Germany, divided as it was, in many smaller and larger entities, did not play a very important role in Europe. He saw possibilities for the German language and for German literature, serving as mediators for the dissemination of work in foreign languages throughout Europe. So I'm saying that Goethe, because of his greatness as a poet, fought, because Germany was still divided into so many. It was called the Prussia originally, or Prussia, or Prussia, or Austria and Germany. And recently, 20 years ago it was, or 30 years ago it was East Germany and Western Germany and blah blah blah. This idea was all the time the case in German culture or in German politics. Goethe, because he's such an arrogant man, thought that he was, or German language was so powerful that it can unite Germany, Europe. He wanted to say that. He said the German language throughout Europe. He said, thus a transnational literature would come into being that would serve the cause of understanding and toleration among nations and peoples. Really, this is a nice phrase here, toleration. Toleration, when you tolerate. Yeah, and I think when you understand somebody and you tolerate him or her, you accept them and you accept him or her, whether you like them or not, but you accept them. You agree with them or not, but you accept them. This is tolerance. And I think the idea we say in Arabic, we say at-tasamuh. And I think this is a good idea, that because Europe was under such huge upheavals, he thought that this transnational question could help to spread the, if you like, tolerance and understanding and equality and peace and so on. Okay, so the idea, he's saying, yeah, when you accept other nations, when you accept other people, when you say, okay, I think this would be a very nice thing, and I think this is very, very good. Many times, to be honest with you, many times, I will tell you one thing here, really, it's my own private, if you like, personal feeling and reaction about being here in Oman or being in Saudi or being in any other place. Sometimes people, they want to show you that they welcome you here, and they say, this is your country. Don't ever feel that you are a stranger, or you are a foreigner, or you are a stranger. They make you feel at home, So this feeling of at home, and I have been told many times by people here, they say to me, you know, when they know that I'm, for example, I am Syrian, I'm not from Oman, they say, this is Baladak. You know, immediately they say, had Baladak. The first word they say, this is your land, this is your country. Don't feel that you are outsider. You know, and I think this is very good, and this is what the idea of tolerance, and this is the idea of understanding and tolerance. When you treat people as your own people, and I think this is the question here, what Goethe was trying to say, saying if you read other people's cultures and read other people's languages and read other people's literatures, you will understand them, you will accept them, you will say, okay, yeah, we don't speak the same language, but we accept each other, you know? And really this is amazing thing, and this is lovely thing I have discovered here about, for example, Oman. I've noticed so many Omanis speak Urdu or speak Indian language or speak whatever, which is, to me, I was really amazed sometimes when I hear people speaking different languages, and I say, wow, this is good. Really, this is good. And this is part of the tolerance, I'm saying, part of the understanding of the meaning of what we call here world literature. Okay? So here I go, you know, there are some people say, well, some people said that writers of larger nations take more, if we like, precedence or take more prominence than others. Well, maybe, like for example here, a German, like for example, German, French, English, German, Spanish, Italian, etc. Maybe these are supposedly to be larger nations. Well, you see, this could be true because sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes, yes, I think there are cases when larger nations dominate. I think this is natural in many ways, really. And here we have some names, some people, as you can see, but I don't really pay much attention to them. But I say here, let me give you again the question of George Steiner, how this writer, of course, at the end of this, you know, he gave this idea about Goethe's notion or the idea of the world literature. Notice, Steiner still feels that the true knowledge of world literature escaped even Goethe because of the sheer volume of materials to be read and studied, which made it impossible even to Goethe's time, even to the greatest genius, to truly fathom it all. What remains valid in Goethe's concept of world literature, though Steiner argues, is the idea of comparison, the idea of gaining greater insight even into one's own language and literature by getting to know other languages and literatures, especially so through translation, as Art Goethe practiced throughout his life. You see, so this is the idea. Really, the whole idea is what these people are saying, that the question of comparison, to compare German with French, French with Spanish, Spanish with Greek, Greek with English, English with Italian, and so on. So this comparison really is important and is valuable, and we understand each other through this comparison. And that's why we said comparative literature. So we gain insight and we know each other, we understand each other through reading our literatures. You know, this is the idea. When you study somebody's language here, we said the comparison and contrast and so on. So you know the language and then you know the literature. And of course, you know it through translation. Either you translate it or you make your own people to translate and to ask your own, educated people to translate and so on. So translation is very important here. Translation is a key question here. And really, this is the idea, what we are saying here, that about world literature. And David Damrosch, as we shall see later, David Damrosch really was a modern, as I told you last time, he was the man who came to our, in fact, conference exactly last year, like today. He was here, and we had a conference, and I'm sure some of you attended that conference. And David Damrosch was, he spoke a lot about this, and he's a professor at Harvard University, and he speaks about that, and he writes a lot about world literature, and he wrote a lot of stuff. In fact, let me see. No, this is not edited by him. This is edited by 3 other people. But you see, Damrosch wrote, later on I will show you, wrote another absolutely important stuff on world literature. And I think he is such an influential figure, although sometimes I really think, and I disagree with him to some extent, some of his stuff, to me, I think they are, I don't know, I mean, I don't agree with them. Anyway, David Damrosch, notice here, David Damrosch at the beginning of the 20th century harks back to Goethe's world, well, 21st century, sorry, not 20th century. Goethe's work of literature as circulation of intellectual and more precisely literary goods among nations. Well, you see, he said literary goods. I mean, to say goods, I don't know, to use the word goods here, as if you are buying and selling potatoes or tomatoes or cotton or petrol or something. We're saying goods, literary goods, bida'a adabiyya, I don't know. What do you think? Hello? Are you still here, or you are asleep? Yeah? Hello?
Is he want to say that literature is part of trade or something like this?
Yeah, but is this fair to say goods like buying, selling, and consuming? What do you think? Girls? Yeah? Shaima or Shamsa?
Yes,
Please.
doctor. I think it is not very suitable to use this word here, because it makes the whole idea like it loses its value, its taste. Yeah. So I don't agree with him.
Yeah. Really, the idea David Damrosch wanted to say, well, since we are all producing goods, produce goods, so literary goods, I don't like the word goods here, because really it lowers down the value or the importance or the meanings of literature. Because literature, at the end of the day, well, it is valuable, it's important, not just goods. It's not really bida'a, it's not really trade business. It can be when you want to sell and buy books and you pay money for books, okay. But you see, it's not a matter of lowering it down to the question of, the value of money and so on. So the idea really here is David Damrosch is, I think, is a little bit trying to play with the language and play with the terminology. I think, isn't it, Ya Shayma, Ya Makhmari? What do you think, Shayma? Can't you speak? Can't you speak? Okay, so Shayma can't use her microphone. Zainab, Zamzam.
Yes, doctor.
How are you, Ya Zamzam?
Fine. What about you, doctor?
Yeah. The last course you were with me in studies in longer fiction, was it?
No, doctor, it's academic writing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No, academic writing, and you are here now in world literature.
Yes.
Wow, you are art. You are not art student. You are art student, correct?
Education.
Education.
I'm an education.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying really here is, well, what do you think about this question of Damrosch is using this, as we shall see, really in maybe trying, he wanted to say that any literature can be world literature. To me, I think, I don't know, I mean, do you agree with that? Can any literature be world literature?
I think so, doctor. If it is valuable, so this work can be a world literature.
If it's valuable. Yeah, okay. Maybe, yeah, somebody, yeah. Okay, no, the idea really is quite interesting here to see that, but later on we shall see Damrosch in his own introduction later on. So here we have the next section, world literature theory. And as you can see, I go back to Goethe, because really the whole question here at the end is, as you can see, even let me see. Really, Goethe later on is going to be given another chapter, as you can see later. I'm trying to go quickly to see that, but you see the idea really in these sections here. I have so many. I think a lot of passages which I have not highlighted, but please, as I say, quickly look at those. Again, here we talk about comparative literature, and to see how this comparative literature has affected that to the study of world literature, and the question here of post-colonialism and so on. I think this is to do with what Damrosch was talking about, again, about the whole idea of what is really world literature. Again, I think there are a lot of things being repeated here and there. Again, the next section, comparative literature and world literature. I think I have said that indirectly. You can quickly again read this because, as I said, really this is not really important as such. The next point, as you can see, market and the system or systemic and materialistic or materialist readings. Again, to go back to goods, and to go back to the globalization, and to go back to the question of facility or bourgeois attitudes to literature, or to the canonization, and so on and so forth. Using the question of production, to use it again in the same way as goods as possible. Now, Gertie, it's this knowledge and the unsupporting communication network that would facilitate the emergence of world literature. In Gertie's opinion, a world literature as such is inevitable, with the ever-increasing facility of communication is to be formed in the near future. Again here to see about the question of communication, because when you need the question of intercommunication or intercultural communication or communication, again to go to other cultures, to other nations, again this is the same thing about the need of communication, and therefore world literature really emerged. Again here, Marx and Engels used the same thing about the question of production and goods in the same way, because David Damrosch used the word goods, referring to the bourgeoisie or the bourgeois or the Marxist idea of the production and the consumption, the consuming and producing. So who's producing literature and who's consuming literature? This idea here, again, notice 20 years later, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels supported Goethe's impressionistic description with a materialist theory of social change and economic expansion for the formation of a world economy, and a world literature went hand in hand. Notice here, they said the bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character of production and consumption of every country. And as in material, so also in intellectual production, the intellectual creations of individual nations become common property. And for numerous national and local literatures, there arises a world literature. Yeah. Well, you see, when I think in this way we understand, when you write a novel in Oman, it's not, it belongs the property of the whole Omani culture. It's not your own property, because you're using the Omani culture, the Omani society, the Omani language, the Omani, for example, dialect, the Omani, whatever conceptions of things. Therefore, what you write will not be your own property. It will be the property of the nation. It will be the property of society. And I think this is true in some extent. Karl Marx and Engels saying this about the production and the consumption, by how, the bourgeoisie consumes and, etc., how it exploits the production of everything, comparing how, everything society produces becomes the property, the ownership of the whole society. It's not the ownership of the person who makes it. And this is the idea about the individualism, or the question of the common ownership. Common ownership. Of course, later on we shall see about that, because in language, and when you use the language, then that's it. So the market and material dimensions of world literature has, as if you like, acknowledged by Goethe in relation to the role of translations, literary journals, travel and communications, and so on, did not form part of the main narrative about world literature until very recently. So what really here we are saying is again the question here of the importance of translations, the importance of journals, the importance of travels, the importance of communications, how people, bring into the nation other sources and other things from outside, and so on. So really, this is the whole idea I think this is interesting. Now, there are many things here. I think I'm not going to read that. Please read it on your own and look at it. And the last point here about expanding world literature, you know, and I think this is the last section here I will read today. What do we expand? How do we enlarge the concept? Now, we said it's the same thing, really. It became more comprehensive, okay? Notice, it's obvious that there's too much literature in the world for an individual to read all of it. But the same point holds true for the literature of a single nation or in a single language. So selection is inevitable, is really an inevitable part of our engagement of literature. You know, we have to select. You can't read everything. You can't read everything. And this is it. The way what I selected is different from my friends, what they selected, what different from other people, what they select, and so on. So we have to select, we have to choose, because there are so many things in front of us, you know? So here again, we say selection occurs in different settings, from the personal reading selection of this curriculum of a course in world literature, and the collection and the collective work of creating literary histories and anthologies. The idea of world literature also becomes or implies the need to expand national and comparative traditions and to take in more works, languages and literatures. Well, yeah, the idea that, you know, the idea of world literature is we have to open our minds more, really, more open to expand our national feeling and to have comparative tradition, meaning to take other people's ideas from other languages and from other literatures. And I think that's true, because that's the meaning of world literature, to take from other people, to borrow from other people. And really, this is the idea at the end of the whole thing. So, however, he said the precondition for including more is to exclude others as we are not able to add more hours to the day and more days to the year. The aspiration to expand the field of world literature thus revolves around redrawing canons to reflect greater diversity and inclusivity, inventing new uses for world literature, and describing how collective and individual work in the field might be carried out. Well, that's what David Damrosch is doing, and that's what we are doing. You know, we have to reread what is world literature, and we have to expand it. That's why, for example, today we are using a lot of African literature, a lot of Asian literature, a lot of African literature, a lot of maybe Indian or Chinese or Pakistani or Turkish literature, because we are saying it's not fair. You know, there are other things which we can include, we can think of as really valuable. Okay, so this is the idea here. We have to expand, and that's the idea. We need to expand and to say, hey, we have more people, we have more, maybe important people. So here, because again, is a part of the core canon of a larger literature does not mean that one is part of the canon and of world literature. You know, the idea again, we say what is core and what is not core, what is really central and what is peripheral, what is central and what is marginal. You know, the whole question of marginalization others and centralizing others, really this is not fair again. There is no really what is central and what is not central. It depends on how you look at it and you think of it. And this is the idea again of canonization and the whole thing, what we have been talking about. Another perspective to canons, again, the same thing. David Damrosch, who proposes, and we combine highly canonized works, that's world literature in the old sense, of the world's best and most universal literature, and lesser known works which show a affiliation with the established canon. Well, that's what we are doing. Looking at the canon, and we importing some maybe people, some other people who might be not important, who might be related to the canon, who are maybe less important and maybe less valuable. So that's really what his idea is, what he said. That's why when he said his approach to the Longman Anthology of World Literature, that's his book, which we shall see later on, we shall see it together. Okay, so really that's the idea. We say world literature as a mode of reading rather than a fixed canon. Yeah, and really this is the idea, and I think we agree with that. There is no fixed canon. It's not a fixed canon. It's not fixed. It's not sacred. It's not final. It's not eternal. It is a mode of reading. It's a way of reading. It is a way of looking at things. And I think that's the meaning here of what Damrosch is saying, and I agree with him here, that the way you visualize and the way you see this poem, you say, whoa, this is really a lovely poem, and it's as more important and more maybe valuable than maybe many other canonized texts. And really this is the whole idea, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to stop here and I will continue with you next time. The idea, the whole idea is, I think, is clear by now. I will continue this introduction about